sir, we're extremely elated to have you with us. Your work lies at the intersection of statistics, administration, and the welfare of the common demographics. Yet people tend to ignore what it is exactly. So we're really excited to unpack that journey with you. We'd start off by understanding you. What made you venture into psephology and statistics? What was your journey?
So psephology came much later. Journey into statistics actually is mathematics. My father was a mathematics statistics professor at Indore, and I learned a lot from him. In that era, the word statistics outsiders never understood what is all that. Okay, but my interest primary was maths, and maths which relates to real world, and that naturally took me to statistics. Other option was engineering. That is what used to be there for most of my friends, but I was not that excited with that. So it was statistics which excited me, and I chose to do that. That brought me to statistics and probability, and for several, maybe decade and more, I was like what can be called a pure theoretician. I won't know how to do this talk. Okay, you want to ask me what theorem I can state and how to write a proof, I could do that, but a general conversation I was very poor at. Then after a while I started looking for actual applications of what I have been doing, and not so easy because I was known as a theoretician. Who will come to me to seek a solution, right? It's a chance event that led me to psephology. CSDS, they were looking for a statistics advisor, and I used to be in Delhi at ISI, so a chance interaction led me to that. Then I went into it full-fledged. So see, elections is something which I was interested in right in the early days, and when the opinion polls and these things started, I would keenly follow that. And methodology, anyway, the media doesn't give much about it, but whatever little they gave, I was having critical assessment of that, and I wanted to do things differently. And as soon as I got chance, I started doing it, and that's what led me to psephology.
That's great, sir. So basically, you started off as a pure theoretical mathematician and then you went into this field. What was the deciding factor? What was the deciding moment where you felt that this is where my true calling lies at?
Well, in a sense, I've still not given up theory. Okay, so I am riding two boats, as they call it. Okay, even in the last 1 year, I would have written 2 or 3 papers at the top level. So it's not that I gave up that and came here. I do both the things. See, once you are known, because media, even a few seconds on the media makes people notice you, then I got into all kinds of other applications of statistics to real world. Psephology is main, but apart from that, a whole lot of other questions and answers and so on and so forth.
Why is statistical reasoning especially critical for large scale processes? Let's say elections. We know that it's a uniquely complex process. As a theoretician, as a mathematician, and someone who's been into the game for a long while, how do you think that statistics particularly ventures into administrative fields, and how is it useful?
In modern times, and not by modern times, I'm talking of last 100 years. I'm not talking of last 5 years, not just the Chat GPT era. It was increasingly becoming clear that as the complexities in the countries was expanding and the capacity to do so was expanding, to make a right decision, you need to understand what is the ground reality. Otherwise, it's an ideology. There are many stories of this kind, but Professor Mahalanobis, who created the statistical system in India, he was a physicist. He was a physics professor in Presidency College. And like what I said, I'm riding two boats. He rode the two boats. He was, on one hand, he set up Indian Statistical Institute. On the other hand, he was teaching physics in Presidency College, senior enough to become the principal of Presidency College, Calcutta. Okay, but at the same time doing statistics and apply it to real world problems. I have read that India is very interesting because the Indian cabinet had a statistical advisor, Mahalanobis, before they had a scientific advisor. So Nehru was convinced also that we need this data and this for making the right decisions. Now, post facto, on the hindsight, one can criticize that this was not right, they should have done this, they should have done that. Okay, that constantly keeps happening, and I'm not talking about that. But all along, taking assessment of what the scenario is and making a judgment is very important. For example, let's say the duties. Okay, yesterday it has been in a lot of news with the Indo-EU deal, and of course the Trump duties have been a lot in the news. But it's not just the news, okay, and it's not just punishing a country or encouraging a country. Any such change, any such decision has a huge impact in the overall economy. Now they've reduced the duty on cars, top luxury cars. But what it means is that those who are making cars which are competing with that, they are at a disadvantage. Likewise, the Europe has reduced duties on some of the things which are taken out from India. So that means the people who are producing that have an advantage. So unless you know who is getting advantage, how much extra benefit they have, and this will still be fine. All that needs data, and by data I mean all this needs the ground reality, and that is where statistics is very important. So in normal life we are used to using, okay, so it's something which people anyway do for ages, for centuries, for millennium, but we can do only so much. When you want to do it a larger scale, you need data, you need decision making systems, and that it is ultra important is clear. Now what's the election to do with it? Well, what election has to do with it is that, let's say I say that this is what you should do, you do it. Maybe it gives a success, maybe it gives a failure, but there is no proof ki if you had not done this it would have been worse, right? Because you don't really have full scale system, you don't have a controlled experiment कि ऐसा करने से क्या होगा और ऐसा नहीं करने से क्या होगा. Election is one, people ask me that why are you so much into that? I said this is one proof that even realistic data assessment and decision making can actually lead you to the truth. So nobody knows who is going to get how many seats. And in fact, the first time I got involved, we had a data for less than 10,000 across the country, but properly done, which is most important. It's not just the sample size, but how the sample is chosen and how it is conducted. Done right, even 10,000 gave me. So 98, we were confident that the allies, Vajpayee and his allies, the BJP and allies, would be reaching close. That they will be the largest number was known to everybody, but the number they will reach, we were very close to that number. Just talking to 10,000 people. So it is the only time where you get a chance to do a sample, you get a chance to analyze, you are forced to analyze and quickly come out with the answer. People notice that answer. It's not later you say, mujhe to malum tha. That doesn't mean anything. People say, everybody claims that so. But here there is record. So that is the importance. What has transformed last 20-30 years is communication speed and computational speed. Earlier, when I would teach also, people, we will say suppose this, suppose that, but we knew that suppose is never going to happen. Nobody is going to have that kind of data. And even if they gave me data, I can't, it will take me days to analyze, implement all my formulae, right? So these two things have drastically changed. Now nobody now asks me what is statistics, what does it do? Because people see the power of data.
So you've mentioned about a very important factor in your words that when you're collecting a sample, the size instead of the size, the quality matters.
More size also matters, but the quality matters a lot more. Somebody says 1 lakh sample, big deal. Depends on how is it collected.
So, sir, what defines a good sample? What differentiates a good sample from, let's say, a less better sample?
All right. So it's not a property of the actual sample you have collected. It's the methodology by which you chose the sample. So in my talks, which are several of them are there on YouTube, you can hear. Early days, I used to call it the method of going to a pawn shop in the big cities. Today, it is changed to going to a mall. You want to collect data on Delhi, what people think, and with the same amount of money, you can do much larger sample by just going to. You go to there are 4 of you. You go to 4 malls in 4 corners of the city, and in 2 hours, you can talk to 100 people. collect that data. You have got, in 2 hours, you have got 400 sample size data. But will that give you exactly how the people of Delhi think? No. Because who goes to mall? Uh, at that time, depends on, is it a weekday, is it a working day, what time of the day? That will decide which class of people are going to the mall, more broadly speaking, right? So I say, if that is to decide whether is Coke liked by people more or Pepsi, it's fine. It really doesn't matter. But for a critical decision making, that is just not on. You can be right and you can be off by a mile. So properly chosen sample means there are the statistics books have and methodologies have. You have to there is a notion of randomly choosing a sample. Now unfortunately the word random itself is misunderstood. Okay, most people take the word random as a synonym of arbitrary, and the way to people say, no, I don't think so. I said, look, we all use the word RAM for a phone or for a laptop or anything. What is the size? How much is the RAM? Oh, RAM has now gone from this to this big. What does RAM stand for? RAM stands for random access memory. Okay, as this location, is it a 1 or a 0? Now you imagine, large number of numbers are stored, 1 and 0. You cannot ask you, okay, pick one number at random and tell me is it 1 or 0. Either of the answer doesn't reveal anything. Whereas you will say, in location number 733, what is the number? That may give you some information. Okay, so it is not random access. The word random access came as an arbitrary access to differentiate from earlier. You may have only heard or seen in movies or maybe old in your parents' home, that there used to be something called a cassette recorder, where on a magnetic tape the voice is recorded, and you can't just, like on a CD you can go to song number 3. On a cassette you couldn't go to song number 3. You have to fast forward to 3 and then do it, because you could only access linearly. Okay, whereas it's just like on a CD, you want to go to song number 3, it can start at 3. So random access memory stands for arbitrary access memory. Okay, so coming back, the problem is people misunderstand what do we mean by random sample. And for example, there are 5 of us in this room. Do we represent a random sample of size 5 in the city of Delhi? No, we don't. People have argued with me, why? No, because if you say all possible groups of size, this is also one group, so we could have been chosen. So how can you say it is not a random sample? That's why I say it's not the group which will decide, is it not the final chosen people who will decide is it random or not. It is the methodology by which you arrived at that group. And not random selection can do arbitrary mistakes. It can be completely out of control. I don't have to give examples of election data, but properly done election work will not lead to disasters as they happened in 24 or earlier in 2004. And I have a long lecture on this and an article on this in the Hindu Center thing, where I've given the entire list of whatever election analysis I have done, right, wrong, everything. It shows that you can be off this. Nobody can say that you will be on the dot every time, but by and large you will be on the dot. Proper sample done.
So it is quite ironical that the word random isn't so random when it comes to sampling.
No. And even statisticians, when they have finished their masters and so on, after a while they start using that. I tell them that you are a statistician, you should not use the word random arbitrarily. It is arbitrary. You should use the word random when you really mean it.
So, sir, what exactly are the variables that are considered when it comes to specifically election predictions? Basically, what are the factors or variables that statisticians look out for while selecting a random sample?
Firstly, you look at what are the important variables, okay, or what are the important attributes. Now, people could say gender, people can say caste, people can say religion, people can say economic status, but all these are variables where I don't have a list of everybody. The list of people is not there, right? And especially even when the election commission has a list, it has a gender, it has the age, but it still doesn't have the caste, religion, economic status and all that. So I can't really generate a sample with those attributes. Okay, and there are ways of doing it, but that is far more complicated. And you see, things which are static, so like various things done by the government, Ministry of Statistics, they are year-long surveys, and what we are measuring is a static thing. Unemployment, it's not instantaneous कि आज 5% है कल 10% हो गई, परसों 2 हो गई. Whereas opinions in an election are highly dynamic. Okay, so you can't do a year-long survey and come to a conclusion. You want to do it very quickly. So these variables, controlling them and doing a sample is very, very difficult, impossible nearly. So it's an art and science of statistics when you do elections work. So you start with what is desired, what you would like, what is your outcome you want, what is doable. Amongst them, what is the best you choose. So, for example, we know that state to state, the opinion of people as political opinion varies a lot. It has to do with the political history of that state, how various party leaders have performed there, who has been in power, people like them, not like them, blah, blah, blah. You cross, let's say, UP Bihar border or Karnataka Tamil Nadu border, the two districts on the both sides may be socio-economically very, very similar, but the voting patterns will be very different. So the state-wise matching is the must. Then within the state, regional things are must. So we have developed a methodology and that has proven to be successful. We ignore everything else. State and regions within that, and get a list of all the voters in that. You ignore gender, you ignore age, you randomly choose people, go door to door. You're doing a thing on phone is not the same thing. Firstly, phone number, you can't even decode from which location the person is talking, from which location the person lives currently. Portability is there now. So you have to go door to door, which is a lot more expensive. Many of other science, I'm not talking just commoners, even science people who understand this, they joke with me saying, oh, you did something 25 years ago and you don't want to learn new things, so you are going away. Oh, forget it, now social media is there and so on and so forth. This door to door is all passé now. But I tell them, look, I mean, social media, okay, number of people using social media is large, but what is the proportion and what group? Okay, and will you be able to represent all the economically poorer, the villagers, etc., etc.? They may not have access. They say, no, teledensity is now 90% in India. 90%, there are 90% connections as compared to the population. But how many of us have more than one with us? Each one can look at their own house. How many total phone connections we have compared to the household size? At least landline plus each one having a phone. In other words, the teledensity is a poor estimate. Number two, even there, how many will answer a phone? In US, it is a big problem now, because they started doing telephone surveys, and for a while it has worked well, and now it has gone haywire. The percentage of people who are willing to answer on phone has gone down dramatically, and it has its own impact. Door-to-door surveys, till the last one that I was actively involved 10 years ago, let's say, people were happy to answer door-to-door, large proportion. Refusal rates were like 8 to 10%. If we have to have various control mechanisms, but with that, and we have very good track record to prove that it works.
So, sir, you mentioned that opinions are dynamic. It varies state to state, and so technology has evolved, right? So, the field of psephology, the problem that it currently faces is that people don't tend to believe the results that much. How do you think that this trust gap can be bridged?
Okay, you have put a very interesting question. So let me go back a little to the history. India, I'm not talking global. Okay. Till Dr. Prannoy Roy came up with doing this on television. Earlier, nobody had the money and to do a nationwide survey. There were some attempts made, but let me ignore that. Let me start from the time Dr. Pranay Roy started in the 80s. Okay, at that time, not just trust, there was ultra trust of people. Okay, what his prediction would be, there will be a 8-column headline on a newspaper. Television ki before, there were no television news at that time, only DD news, which hardly was there in the big cities, and 4 metros, and even then just 2 hours a day, and nobody was watching them. So the newspaper was the main source. It used to be an 8-line headline. I remember 82 election and 84 election and so on and so forth. Okay. From there, but that gives a excessive power to whoever has that, whoever publishes that. Slowly 8-column became 2 columns, and not top but in the bottom. Even the newspaper. So typically, by the time I got involved, it was jointly with the television channel and the newspaper. But even the newspaper, which is paying half the cost, they would make it the headline. They would pay front page, but second half of the page and 2 columns. It still had a lot of power, and people have questioned me on that. I've given talks on this all over, and they'll say that, if you accept that it has a feedback loop, namely, if I say meaning based on the data, if we say that such and such party is winning, actually more people may vote for them. So that is what I mean by feedback loop. So people challenge me saying that if you accept this, why are you involved with it? I said, look, I walking out of it doesn't mean this will be ending it, right? Others will still do it. So somebody who is doing methodologically correct thing is required, and then people can judge for themselves. Right? Now, what happened after that is that with aggressive television, multiple channels, everybody marketing, and so on and so forth, and decision makers, basically they look at as an economic decision. So the finance in a television channel would tell us that, oh, all India survey you did last one for Lok Sabha, this much was the money we gave you. Now next is Tamil Nadu election. Tamil Nadu is 6% of the population, so we'll give you 6% of the money. I tell them, you want same accuracy, I want similar money, and that they are not willing to accept. Now even if the bosses accept, the finance releases the money, but they think that we are taking them for a ride, because they don't understand that it's not the sampling size is not as a proportion, but the sample size. So there are many such technical things which people don't understand, and over a period of time, now it has come to another extreme. News channels don't care if they are right or wrong. They want more eyeballs, more viewer on their channel. That's it. They don't care who is right, who is wrong. So they don't put money on. So it's not that today who are doing surveys don't know what should be done. I'm not saying everybody does, but several of them know, but they don't get money. So why would they put their own money in getting the survey done? Going back 15 years ago, let's say, when we were doing with CSDS doing the survey, the cost of CSDS, which is a non-profit organization, basically non-profit, just cost of doing various things, the cost to the channel was 6 times the cost to the rival channel for whom the survey was done by AC Nielsen, a multinational body. 6 times. Not just 5%, 10% more. 6 times more. But that is what is needed if you want to do a proper survey. If channels are unwilling to pay for it, so wait. So going back, earlier I started working with Aaj Tak group, which were doing this for Doordarshan. Then they had their own channel, but then they were not interested. They were not keen on putting so much money on the surveys. And 2004 was a disaster. Everybody went wrong, just like 2024. Then CNN as a new channel was launched, and they committed to us that they will do it proper methodologically and give the required money. And for 10 years, they had a standard contract with CSDS doing the data work and me doing the analysis, and we have a great track record. And I can't quote anyone, but 2024, the people who, not for media, but people who did a survey for markets, they had a much clearer understanding of what is happening than what the media. it was clear that it would be closer to 300 and not 350, 400. It was clear.
So, just for our listeners, how was the field of psephology, let's say 20 years ago? Right now, the technology has evolved. There are systems like VVPATs and everything. But previously, we did not have, like you only mentioned that you used to conduct door to door service and you still prefer to do the same. What exactly was the procedure and how has it changed right
By the way, VVPAT has not to do with opinion poll. VVPAT is the actual voting thing. That's a separate issue. Now, technology has evolved, but unfortunately, not everything changes with technology. Technology, all it can do is, I do a survey, let's say today at your home. Older days, I will write it down and then it will take time to transmit. Today, I can, on the phone, I can record the answers and it can go instantaneously. But face-to-face questioning versus on-phone questioning, that difference cannot be gapped by technology. You can supplement. Okay, you take a small size with this older methodology, you take a larger size with social media, telephone surveys, and understand how things are evolving and mix and match the two. But one cannot be replaced completely, is my view. I may be proven wrong in years to come, who knows. But my view is that you can't really do away with the door-to-door method. It can supplement, the modern things can supplement that. Okay, technology can be used to improve some things, but you can't replace the old thing. And these things are very country to country, location wise, all these things are there, complex.
So, sir, when it comes to voting processes, institutional decisions, people and democracies, and especially technological advancements, all of them interact to create a complex and unique system when it comes to elections.
At the time of independence, when they started the voting, okay, uh, for each candidate there used to be a separate box, and each voter was given a sheet, and you had to go and put that sheet in the box you want to vote for. Okay, so when I was growing up, I would hear slogans like that which box will you put your vote in such and such box. From there they realized that the numbers had started increasing and the number of candidates was increasing. So they changed it to that one paper on which all the names are printed, and you tick, not tick, but there was a stamp given. You put a stamp on whoever you want to vote for. That evolved, and again they realized that even that the way population is going, it is going to be very, very difficult. So as early as 1984, they had come up with the idea of electronic voting machines, and the first experiment actually was done in Kerala in 83 election, maybe I may be off the mark, but something around that, 82, 83. And one constituency, part of the voting was done on EVMs, where you press a button, electronic voting machine as it now, not the current version, but some preliminary version. But the loser immediately challenged in the court and saying that this is not as per the law, the so-called law which governs voting is the Representation of People's Act, and that specifically mentioned paper ballot and stamp and all that. So the court, of course, rejected that election. But that was a learning, what to do, what not to do. And with that, Election Commission and government and other officials kept on working on designing what we now hear as EVM. Okay, it needed change of law, it needed change of agreements of various people, and that came up in trials earlier. But 1999 election, Lok Sabha election, was the first time that about 50 constituencies they moved to completely electronic voting like we have today. And everybody was all praise about that, no questions asked. All right, and then they did various state elections, and in 2004 they moved to the entire nation. 2003 already, that all Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha elections will be happening on EVMs, and they had updated their older systems and made it newer. Of course, as is usual the case, the losers would try to complain, that it is EVMs which did us in, etc., etc. There were tons of court cases typically rejected. But there was one point raised which the Supreme Court could not reject, but they did not declare the previous election invalid, but they urged the Election Commission, government, political parties to work together. The point was that the Representation of People Act says that a losing candidate can appeal to have a recount based on some reason. You have to give that this is why you are suspicious, okay? So you have to give a justification. But you can ask for a recount and the returning officer can call for recount. But here the question was with the EVM, how do you do a recount? There is no way of possible of doing a recount on EVM. You have pressed that plug once and it has thrown a number. Now finished. So the court urged the Election Commission, the government and parties to work together to come up with a way of addressing this or change the law. It would have been simpler for the government to change the law, but then there may not have been agreements. So this was actually before 2014 election, and they came up with, based on some international meetings and discussions, some others have done this, and they came up with this thing called VVPAT, which stands for Voter Verifiable Paper Audit Trail. Okay, but it was realized that to have for a nationwide thing, it would require a lot more of machines and money. But they gave assurance that, not this Lok Sabha election, by next Lok Sabha election we will implement it. So 2014 happened without VVPAT. Then when Election Commission put up the cost required, money required to, it was something of the order of 3,500 crores to get VVPATs. Because remember, the size is such that 2019 election, there were more than 10 lakhs, so more than 1 million polling booths. And as it is with EVMs, there are many issues where they will be tested till the last minute and it can be declared that this one is not working. The battery is not working, something is not working, and may not be that every place there is a replacement available, but in the vicinity, in the district, so within a couple of hours a new machine will come and voting will start later and continue later in that location. But for that, the built-in redundancy is 60%. So for 10 lakhs, they needed 16 lakhs. So 16 lakh VVPATs have to be created and tested and so on.
So the operational costs are high when it comes
Very
to technology.
But it was approved, agreed, everything. And then Election Commission felt that, with EVMs, every time there is so much of negative publicity and so on, they will do this random counting. That in Election Commission, their rules are written as if it's a Vidhan Sabha election. And they do Vidhan Sabha and Lok Sabha. If it's a Lok Sabha, 8 constituencies have the same candidates. That's the only difference. All their rules are written as if it's a Vidhan Sabha election. So there are, in 2019, there were 4,025 assembly segments. They said that each of policy written down, each of the 4025 segments, they will pick one booth at random and then test. They'll count the VVPAT count and the EVM count and match. Okay, VVPAT count means each time you put a vote, there will be a slip of paper which will be printed, not giving the name of the voter, but the party name and the symbol to whomever the voter has voted for. That you can see for a moment of time, few seconds, and then it falls back in a box. And so all the chosen VVPATs, randomly chosen VVPATs, the counting will be done and matched with the EVM vote. So then people went on saying that no, the 1 per segment is too small. That means 4,000 out of 10 lakhs. That is too small a sample size. We want 5%. We want 10%. We want 20%. So if you say 5, she can say 10. He can say 20. She can say 50. So by the time the various court cases, they want in 50% count. Now, if 50% VVPAT count, then you need not have gone over to the electronic system at all. You could have stayed with the original paper ballot, and it has its own limitations. So but the court cases were there, and that is how Election Commission put up a committee which included me. That what is a assume I forget everything else. What is a statistical way of doing this? And if the question was, we are confident that all 4025 they will be match, because the design is such. We had interacted with the expert team which had designed the EVMs, and so we are convinced. But then, how does one statistically verify that, validate? Now the question was, is one per assembly segment good enough or not? And if one is good enough, then statistically, how can we validate? Based on statistical principles, we had written down a detailed report, which actually was part of the final affidavit filed by Election Commission to the Supreme Court, okay, in 2019. Can we say that, okay, that means all the 10 lakh things are absolutely perfect? No. After all, it is only sample. So if one has gone wrong and it is not chosen on the sample, we will not be able to catch it. So that is certainly not true. But is there a systematic tinkering which is possible? And then we made some assumptions, which is there in our report, that because the allegation is, what is the alternate, what in statistics we call, what is the alternate hypothesis? Okay, the alternate is that somebody has designed a way of tinkering with the EVMs so that it can be tweaked in whichever way they want. And our assumption was that if somebody actually has designed such a thing, then the entity or the group of people, they will not stop at doing it at one location. They will like to maximize their impact. Looking at various things, we came up with a number that if we can statistically validate that errors, if any, are less than 1%, then we can say that there is no systematic manipulation possible. Okay.
So, sir, how exactly are the VVPAT slips used for the post-poll verification? Like, what exactly is the process?
Okay. The process is, let's say one booth is chosen randomly. So because of my thing about random and arbitrary, so we actually went through the process given by them of what do they mean by random and how will that be implemented. And we were satisfied that that is properly done. Now, suppose a booth is chosen under this scheme to be verified. Then what happens? Then, let's say I am a returning officer and you four of you are representing 4 different candidates as their polling agent. Now, in your presence, we will say, okay, right now, here is the EVM, this is the count on that, we are observing, and here is the VVPAT, which is as of now locked. Now, we will open the VVPAT door, take out all the ballot papers inside there, and we will physically count them. Each booth has at most about 1000 to 1200 max, typically less voters. So this will be about 600 to 800 who have actually voted. That we will physically count, and with a video camera on, so that no tinkering is possible. And then we will say, okay, candidate A has so many votes, B has so many votes, C has so many votes, and EVM count we have already got. Now we check, and after that we all will sign a piece of paper that in our presence, booth number such and such, the EVM and VVPAT validation was done, and this is the result.
There must be some shortfalls to this system as well, right? Some downfalls must have been there when you introduced the system of VVPAT, right? As compared to the previous methods before technology advanced. So what do you think are some shortfalls that still exist or some loopholes that are still there?
Okay. So again, since all of you are so young, you have not heard these stories of the older times where there used to be what used to be called vote stuffing. Okay. So some organized gang comes to a booth and with a gun in their hand, booth capturing. There were many reports of this kind. It's not saying that all the elections are of this kind, but it was very much there. Okay. Some of them even video links were there. Then, and the counting day also, it is very difficult to verify that the correct counting is done. So that was a big problem there. Plus, so much paper and so on and so forth, the total time taken, so much issues were there. VVPAT, EVM solved them all, but it has introduced one new element. In the older system, nobody could figure out that which way did this colony vote for or this village vote for, because the process was in one constituency, all the ballot boxes will be opened, the paper mixed together, and then mixed it well, and then separated in 10 parts and then count. So nobody can tell कि house caste के लोगों ने कहाँ पर vote किया और this village में कहाँ vote किया. Today, because the vote count on every booth is available, not made easily available by the election commission, but the polling agents are there, so each candidate knows, and that is a big question mark. And election commission has a solution to this, but there is no agreement politically about how to implement that. So this remains a drawback in my view. In fact, in 2019, at one press club in Mumbai, I gave a little bit of explaining this and then question answer, and based on that, in the evening newspaper, they reported with a line, the headline chosen captured what I would have liked to say, though I had not used that line. They said, it said that EVMs better than traditional voting machines, says the pathologist Karandikar. So I wouldn't say it is perfect, but it is better than the older method. Okay, for sure.
Okay, right. So, could you maybe provide us some insights on the opinion polls part? What exactly, how is the process done when you're conducting an opinion poll? What are the factors or what are the prerequisite variables that you are considering to, maybe avoid any sort of discrepancies or to provide a better explanation or prediction?
Okay, so different people have different ways of doing things. It is also dependent on how much money is available. So I will describe what my preferred method, and the only thing in which I am involved, we always did it this way. Okay, so we start again with the objective. So the objective is to predict the overall seat distribution at the Lok Sabha. Let's say same can be done with Vidhan Sabha. We have done a lot of Vidhan Sabha elections also, but whichever way, I'll talk about Lok Sabha. So you have 543 constituencies, 543 candidates will be elected, and the law says that if a group and party and the pre-poll alliances, they get together, and so for me, I'm talking about alliances. Let's say one group which is fighting together. Now, on television, we can hear people saying all these about the caste and religion and gender, age, economic status. But as I mentioned, that doing a proper sampling on these parameters is very, very difficult, nearly impossible in a short time span. So going to what is feasible, okay, we started designing a system. The first time I did it in 1998, election it was 1997. They had flown in the expert from UK, because our system is very closest to the UK system. Someone who had done it for BBC for 20 years, and we had long chats. And at the end of 2 days, we concluded that whatever is, this is Professor Clive Payne, and that we concluded that whatever he does in UK is not applicable here, though superficially the systems are the same. Because what we call, you all are studying economics or most, so there is volatility, the variation from day to day. So what I use the same phrase, volatility of public opinion. Let's say the percentage of people who may change their vote, aaj ek vote kiya, tomorrow ek one more. What percentage will change? Volatility. So volatility is very high here. In UK, 20 years ago it was very low. Maybe now it has increased a little. But to quote Clive Payne, he said that we debated at length. He was asking me about this, and I was answering, and I was asking. He said that it is so low in UK that if you know that I am a social science professor teaching in Nuffield College, which is under such and such university, you can 99% vote, write down whom I will vote for. And not just me, our entire extended family will be voting Labour. And he then added that the biggest scandal I can think of in my family is if I come to know that my daughter has gone and voted Con. Con is conservative. That is the biggest scandal they can think about. Okay. I said in India, even husband can't say that which way his wife voted or which way his kids voted if they are voting age. They may have rough guess, but especially rural areas, I don't know. Urban areas, you can't do that. So the volatility is so high here. So methodology which has worked and which is the following, that firstly, historically matters, but all the data from 1952 is of no use to me. The country has moved along so much. I want the last election 5 years ago, and if it's Lok Sabha, then I want the last Lok Sabha election. If in between there is a Vidhan Sabha election, I may look at that also. But my primary source will be the last Lok Sabha election, because people do vote differently for state and center elections. So I have had a lot of learning based on the data that we have collected. And so the simplest way to describe our model was that we try to estimate percentage of votes for each alliance in a state. And then we treat as if within the state it is distributed the same way as it was the last time. Broadly correct. At some places it may not be correct, but that is the best we can do.
Right. So opinions are volatile, right? And so it gets difficult for statisticians to maybe convert the vote shares into the projected seats. So irrespective of the percentage in each area, what other factors are considered? Like, is it completely independent of the gender, age, or everything, or are they also considered? Are they taken into consideration?
Okay, others I don't know what they do, but I don't. So what we will do is we will try to see that is there a systematic change in, is it that, let's say the women voters were not voting here at all. Previous election there was only 30% were women, 70% were men. And now it has changed to 60% women, 50%, 40% men. Then we have to factor that in. But it has not happened. Gradually the percentage of women voting has increased, but there is no dramatic change. So there are various check boxes, but other than that, we have a probabilistic model that I have developed in vote to seat conversion. Okay, and that is where my expertise is. So the CSDS data will give me the votes, and my input was in vote to seat conversion. And I developed a model, tested it several times. It had become so perfect that towards the end, let's say I'm on a flight in from Pune to Chennai, I'm going, and the data will be sent to me. I'm in the airport, they're sending. By the time it comes, I have already boarded the aircraft when the data comes in. I have a model ready, everything ready. I run my model, get the numbers. Before I'm on the air, I tell them these are my predictions. It has been streamlined to that extent. But yeah, so many checkboxes. There are many, like when AAP came up first time, now I don't have any past data on AAP. So how to deal with that? Or change of alliances. Somebody, like in Tamil Nadu it happened, they were switching. In one election, AIDMK and BJP were together and Congress and DMK were together. Next election they flip sides. Now how do you factor that? So we have to make some broad assumptions, come up with that. But ultimately it comes down to past election data, just the immediate past data and the current samples. Now there are people, for example, 2014 maybe, we did a reasonable good job, but there were others who did much better than us. There was this entity, I'm now forgetting their names also, Chanakya. They predicted exactly what happened in the Lok Sabha election. So various people asked me, so what do you have to say? So I said, first of all, I can't make any comment about a particular outcome. I can talk about the methodology. If they reveal methodology, we can debate a methodology, and if it appears to be superior to mine, no problem. Just like in academics, if somebody proposes that shows a mistake in my proof or my methodology and proposes alternate, I'll accept it. Methodology discussion is minimal, and there are many whom I may call fly-by-night operators. They come, they do something, they may be right, may be wrong, they go away. So, just like an astrologer, you don't take into account one time. If somebody shows that, last 20 predictions he or she has done, 18 of them have turned out to be correct, I will take a serious look at what they are doing. But one shot, nothing much. So, methodologically, it's one thing.
So would you say that it's a relatively more complex process for countries like India as compared to US? Because in India, the demographic is very varied state to state. And when it comes to US, let's say, considering the elections of last year for US, there were some mishappenings there as well. So how do you factor that in? Could you maybe contrast geopolitically how Indian elections and maybe the elections in US, they vary?
Okay, so I'll compare UK and US. Two places where I have at least superficially taken a look at. Other countries' systems may be different. UK system is same as India. US, the system itself is different, number one. So, as I said, one of the most important factor is the volatility of public opinion. Okay. So in UK, for example, in fact, Clive Payne asked me, how many are safe seats in India? I said, what do you mean by a safe seat? Safe for whom? So he says, safe for us cephalogists, that with no data I can tell who's going to win. I said, wow, maybe 10% max, maybe not even that. All the others have later told me 10% is also too much. Nobody can take for granted even 10%. Whereas there he said 60% are safe seats. Used to be, now they also have moved. But basically then the model was that if somebody has won with a more than 10% gap, they will continue to win now, the same party, or 7%, whatever. In India, the fluctuation is very high. All right. So that is one change between US and UK. On the other hand, in UK, they have for each precinct, as they call it, maybe like a polling booth, they have detailed data on gender, economic, religion, etc., which we don't have. Because census data is there at district level, whereas what we are interested for election is a segment, and there is no matching. Okay, so the basic, there are lots of differences at which the data that we can use is available here and in UK. US is completely different. So US depends, you are talking about the election of the senators or the election of the president. Now, makes news outside is we don't really care. Senate mein kya hua? Sitting far away, all that counts is who won the presidential election. And there it is winner take all in a state. Whereas in India, it is winner take all at each constituency level. And as far as geographics are concerned, yes, US there is a lot of variation, but there they, instead of safe seats, they are talking about, they use the word safe, but they use three colors. They use one for Democrats, one for Republicans, and one which can go either way. And their entire focus is on where the middle one will go. Whereas last two elections, when they had gone wrong horribly, it is based on what they consider to be the safe democratic thing went the other way. And so they're putting entire faith on their prior assessment and not caring about current data is where the issue was in my analysis. Okay. As I said, there is a sampling problem there. They only do phone samples, and actually very minimal number. And the voting is nationwide numbers. What we hear, the Democrats so much percent, that is nationwide number, but what counts is a state-wise number. And they don't focus on that. But we don't know behind the scene what they are doing. What we see is only what is published.
So, sir, circling back to the present scenario and maybe trying to conclude our discussion. So, could you please give some advice to the upcoming new generation who's maybe trying to get into this field, what do you think they could do correct?
Firstly, it's a very risky field. Okay. So my advice would be not to take it up as a full-time, single occupancy thing to do with a full-time cephalogist. Somebody can do it and be successful, but the chances are low because it all depends on who is going to fund that. You may be interested and you are genius enough to do it correctly, but it will need funds. So who is going to fund that? That is one. On the other hand, have a parallel career and keep interest in that and understand what is the best practices, and if somebody approaches, try to do that. That would be the thing. Okay. Now the other thing would be to have faith in random sampling, understand that and talk to people and realize what is the worth of that, because unless you are convinced just somebody has said so I will do it is one thing, but your inner, you have to understand the meaning of that and why is it important, and only then. Like I say that earlier, for years I have taught limit theorems in statistics, probability. I had said that you will do large sample and you will be right, with high probability you will be right, but that was only a theorem. It is when I saw it happening that my conviction has grown up multiple times. Okay, so get involved in some projects, try to get this. Okay, then there is a validation. That is what is sometimes called back testing, which I had done first time I did. So for example, I have a methodology. I did it in 98, let's say. So I look at the previous two elections, 96 and 91. I assume that 91 is my past election, and 96, though I have full data, I treat it as if magically somebody has done a perfect sampling and given me vote percentages of each party in each state. Exact. Will my model predict it correctly? Total number correctly? How far off I will be or how close I will be? That is what is called back testing. Okay. Routinely done with various financial models. Okay. It's not so commonly known in the statistics literature, but especially applying data and finance world, back testing is a commonly used word. Okay. So do back testing, improve models, and no model is perfect. You have to understand it is subject to errors. If you come up with something which you can see that, oh, I should have done this earlier, okay, no harm done, next time do it, things like that.
I'm sure the listeners, they've understood your perspective as well, as somebody who's been in the journey for a long time and who has had so much experience. I'm thanking you on behalf of all our listeners and everybody for sparing us your precious time and giving us the insights into what psephology, elections, and statistics is like through your perspective. Thank you so much, sir.
I'm very happy for this interaction. Do share the responses you get, and
Of course.
I don't promise that I will answer everything, but I'll answer by and large groups
sir.
of questions. Yeah, I'll be very happy to do that.
Thank you so much, sir. This means a lot to us.